I was 40 feet off the ground when my life changed. Not in the way people mean when they say that. No lightning, no phone call yet, just me on scaffolding on the face of a 1920s building in Savannah, Georgia, pressing my fingertips into a hairline crack in original brickwork that nobody else had thought to look for. That is my job. I find the damage people missed, I measure it, I figure out how to fix it without losing what made the thing worth saving in the first place. My name is Elena Rossi-Cade. I'm 31 years old. I drive a truck with 140,000 miles on it. I rent a one-bedroom above a dry cleaner on the east side of Savannah. I eat lunch on job sites, call my grandmother every Sunday at noon, and have never once in my adult life been described as the exciting one. That was fine with me. I was documenting the third crack from the roof line when my phone buzzed. I did not check it. Not because I didn't feel it, but because I was in the middle of a measurement and the building had been waiting 100 years for someone to pay attention to it properly. I finished the measurement, I climbed down, I checked the phone. One text from my brother Marco. Nana's in the hospital. Come home. I read it 4 times, not because I didn't understand it, because Marco used the word home like it still meant something, like Hollow Creek, Georgia was a place I returned to and not a place I had learned to leave gracefully. I looked back up at the building, at the crack I had just measured. I have spent my entire career restoring things other people broke and walked away from. I did not know yet that I was about to do it one final time. If you want to understand what happened to my family, you have to understand first what my grandmother was, and what she was is not a thing you can explain in one sentence. Her name was Elena Rossi-Cade, born in Naples, Italy in 1945, came to America at 27 with her husband Gianluca, $40 in an envelope, and a small ceramic bird she had painted herself the summer before she left. She put that bird on every kitchen windowsill she ever had for the rest of her life. She told me once it was not for decoration. It was so that every kitchen she cooked in would know it had been chosen. That was how my grandmother thought, in a language that was half practical and half something else entirely, something that took me years to learn to hear. She raised my father Dominic in Hollow Creek. She buried Gianluca there in 2001. She kept the house on Sycamore Lane, wraparound porch, Meyer lemon tree in the side yard, and lived in it alone for 23 years without once appearing diminished by the solitude. I called her every Sunday at noon. Not most Sundays, every single one, going back to the first Sunday I spent away from home at 17, when I drove myself to a summer program in Santa Fe that my school counselor had recommended. That was the summer I helped Elena retile the studio kitchens on a property she owned there. I was 17. I didn't know what the property was. I just knew there were 8 small buildings on 6 acres of red dirt, and that the artists lived in them, and that the woman who owned it moved through the space with the quiet authority of someone still building something and not yet finished. She handed me a trowel that first morning. She said, "The tiles go in from the center outward. You always start from the center." Then she went back to her own section and did not hover. I thought she was talking about tiles. She was not talking about tiles, but I did not understand that until much, much later. My Sunday calls with Elena lasted 40 minutes on average. I know that because after she died, I went back through my phone records and added them up. 40 minutes. 52 Sundays a year. 14 years since college. I will not do the full math out loud because I am not done with this story yet. She asked about my buildings, my students, the 1920s schoolhouse I spent 4 months restoring in Charleston, whether I had found the original classroom bell. I had. She asked me to describe the sound it made when I rang it for the first time. I described it. She closed her eyes on the other end of the phone and I could feel her doing it. She said, "That is the sound of something being remembered." She never asked about my salary. She never asked why I wasn't married. She never suggested my life should look different than it did. My father called her on her birthday and at Christmas. My brother Marco called when he needed her to vouch for him to someone. My sister Bianca sent flowers on Mother's Day with a note her assistant typed. My mother, Serena, had not had a warm conversation with Elena in 15 years and had constructed an elaborate internal mythology about whose fault that was. None of them called on Sundays. If you have ever been the one in your family who showed up without being asked, you already know where this story is going. If you have not been that person, pay attention to what comes next, because somebody in your life might be keeping track of something you do not know about yet. The hospital in Hollow Creek smelled like every hospital in every town. Industrial cleaner, bad coffee, the specific tension of people waiting to find out something they are not ready to find out. My family was already there. Marco was in the corridor outside the cardiac ward, phone to his ear, talking about square footage. He saw me. He pointed down the hall. He went back to his call. Bianca was near the window, filming herself from an angle that softened the fluorescent light, speaking in the low, careful voice she used for difficult content. She had 40,000 followers who believed her life was a curated series of meaningful moments. Most of those moments were rented. I knew this because she had borrowed money from me twice to maintain the appearance of a life she could not afford. She saw me, she lowered the phone, she mouthed, "She's okay." I did not stop walking. My father, Dominic, was at the nurse's station asking a question I could hear from 10 feet away, not about his mother's health, but about the process for obtaining medical records. My mother, Serena, was beside him, crying in the specific way she cried when she needed to be noticed doing it. I walked past all of them. I walked to the door of room 114. I knocked. From inside, in a voice smaller than I was used to, but still completely, unmistakably hers, my grandmother said, "Come in, Valentina." She was sitting up in a faded blue gown, eating lime gelatin with the focused, deliberate pleasure of a woman who had decided that if she was going to be in a hospital, she was going to find one thing in it worth enjoying. She looked up at me the way she always looked at me, like she was confirming I was still the same person she had been building a relationship with, and was satisfied to confirm that I was. She said, "You knocked." I said, "Of course I knocked." She said, "You are the only one who knocked." Not with bitterness, the way a naturalist notes the behavior of a species. Observational, precise, final. I sat in the chair beside her bed. She reached over and took my hand. Her fingers were thin, not the thinness of weight, the other kind. "There is a woman named Morel Santos," she said, "in Santa Fe. She is going to call you." I waited. I had learned 20 years ago that my grandmother told you things in her own time, and trying to hurry her was like trying to hurry the tide. "When she calls," Elena said, "you answer." She squeezed my hand once. She picked up her lime gelatin. She ate a spoonful with the composure of a woman who had said exactly what she intended to say and was now finished saying it. The door opened behind me. My father came in. Then my mother, Marco, Bianca. The room got louder the way rooms get louder when certain people enter them. My grandmother's face did not change. She watched her family fill the space around her with the calm expression I had seen her wear at 30 years of family gatherings. The expression of a woman who had long ago stopped being surprised and had decided to be interested instead. She caught my eye once over my father's shoulder. She smiled, the smile of a woman who was in on a joke with someone who had not yet been told the punchline. We went to my parents' house after the hospital. Pasta, wine, the sounds of a family performing togetherness. This performance this family had been giving for 30 years with a lot of warmth on the surface and very little underneath. Marco said, to the table, to no one specifically, that Santa Fe property must be a lot to manage at her age. My mother said, I always thought she'd be better off closer to us.
My father refilled his wine and said nothing, wearing the look he got when he was doing arithmetic he didn't want anyone to see. Bianca said, "Does anyone know if she sorted out the business stuff from Uncle Gianluca's side?" I looked at her. She was looking at her plate. Nobody at that table knew about Monterey. I barely knew. I had heard the word Tierra Fina once, years ago, in a phone call where Elena mentioned it briefly and then changed the subject to a mystery novel she was reading. I had not thought about it since. I thought about it now. I ate my pasta. I watched my family talk around the thing they were actually saying. I thought about a ceramic bird on a windowsill, a trowel, a tile, a woman telling me to start from the center. I drove back to Savannah the next morning. I had a job site, a building that had been waiting 100 years. I was 20 miles outside Hollow Creek when my phone rang. Unknown number, New Mexico area code. I answered. The voice was measured, professional, with the particular calm of a woman who delivered consequential information for a living and had learned to let the silence after it do its own work. Miss Rossi-Cade, my name is Morel Santos. I am your grandmother's attorney in Santa Fe. She asked me to call you tonight specifically. A pause. She said you would need a few months to prepare. I gripped the steering wheel. There are two things your family does not know exist, Morel Santos said, and your grandmother would like to change that, but not yet, and not without you. A shorter pause, like a door opening just wide enough to see the light behind it. Miss Rossi-Cade, I need you to come to Santa Fe. The Georgia farmland kept moving past my windows. The November light kept doing what November light does, thin and honest and indifferent to what it falls on. When? I said. And Morel Santos said,
I did not fly to Santa Fe. I drove. I needed the hours the way you need them sometimes. Not to think exactly, but to let the thinking happen without forcing it. 14 hours through Georgia, into Alabama, into Mississippi, into the long, flat exhale of Texas. Then the slow burn of the landscape changing, browning and then reddening, until the earth looked like something a child painted when trying to show you what the word ancient felt like. I had the ceramic bird on the passenger seat, not Elena's, mine. She had given it to me 3 Christmases ago, a smaller version she had made herself in a ceramics class she took at 76, because she said she had been meaning to learn properly for 50 years and had run out of reasons not to. It sat in a nest of bubble wrap, and somewhere in West Texas, I talked to it the way you talk to things when you have been alone in a car long enough. I told it I was scared. It did not respond, but I felt better for saying it. Morel Santos met me at the gate on a Saturday morning in late November, when the Santa Fe light was doing what it does at that hour. Low and amber and so clean it made everything it touched look like it had just been decided on. I had been here before. I had spent 8 weeks here at 17 with a trowel in my hand and sunscreen I kept forgetting to reapply. But knowing a place at 17 and arriving at 31 with the weight of everything you now carry are 2 entirely different experiences of the same geography. I stood at the gate and looked. 6 acres, 8 studio buildings in warm adobe, a main house with a courtyard tiled in hand-painted patterns that moved like water when the light shifted. Artists crossing the open ground between buildings, one carrying a canvas, one with clay-stained hands, one just sitting on a low wall with the coffee cup and her face turned up to the morning. A garden along the south wall planted not in straight lines, but according to its own logic, which, if you spent enough time with it, turned out to be more sophisticated than anything imposed from outside. Something moved in my chest that I did not have a clean name for. Not quite grief, not quite pride, not quite wonder. Something that contained all 3 and was bigger than any of them. My grandmother had not stayed still. She had been building.
This whole time, she had been building. Marae shook my hand. She was tall, precise, dark hair pulled back, reading glasses pushed up on her head like she was always one document away from needing them. She had the energy of a woman who had been in many consequential rooms and had learned to take up exactly the right amount of space in each. She told me, "You would stand at the gate for a minute before you came in," she said. Was she right about most things? In 22 years of representing her, I can count on one hand the things she was wrong about, and most of those were weather-related.
She walked me through the property the way you walk someone through a place that has a story when you want them to feel the story before you tell it. The 8 studios each had a name, not numbers, names. Italian painters, Caravaggio, Morandi, Artemisia, Tiepolo, each built or converted in a different year, beginning in 1998 when Elena first purchased the land. One building every 2 to 3 years, funded quietly, without announcement, without asking anyone's permission. 14 artists lived and worked here at any given time, all paying subsidized rent from a trust Elena had established through Marae's office in 1998. Artists were selected by a committee Elena had appointed and then deliberately removed herself from. She said she did not want her taste to be the only taste. She wanted the place to be bigger than her preferences. 3 artists who had passed through the property had gone on to national recognition. One, a textile artist from Albuquerque named Rosa Medina, had dedicated her first major gallery show to a woman she described in the program notes only as the landlord who believed in things that hadn't happened yet. I stopped walking when Marae told me that. Did she know? Rosa sent her the program. Elena framed it. It is in the back room of the main house, between a photograph of your grandfather and a drawing you sent her when you were 6. I did not say anything. Marae gave me a moment. She was good at giving moments, a skill developed, I suspected, specifically in service of Elena Rossi-Cade. "Come with me," she said. "There is something else." The back room of the main house was small and cool, north-facing window, a table holding a portfolio the size of a blueprint case. Marae set it on the table, opened it, and stepped back. She did not explain it. She let it speak. I stood over 23 years of a life I had not known existed. Photographs first, a factory floor I did not recognize, ceramic tiles on conveyor lines, workers in aprons, the organized industry of a place that makes things. A building exterior, large, with a sign above the entrance I had to lean close to read. Tierra Fina, Monterrey, Mexico. Then letters, dozens of them, in my grandmother's slanted, unhurried cursive, addressed to a man named Carlos Vega, beginning in 2008. The earliest ones were formal, careful. "I am Elena Rossi-Cade. My husband Gianluca founded this company in 1981. He left it to me when he died. I have not managed it well from a distance. I would like to change that." The later ones were warmer, easier. 15 years of correspondence between 2 people who had come to know each other without ever being in the same room. He reported on production. She pushed back on decisions. She asked about his family. He asked about hers. Export ledgers, year by year, numbers that grew not dramatically, but in the slow, reliable way things grow when someone is tending them properly without demanding they perform. I sat down. I do not know when. My legs made the decision without consulting me. My grandmother had taken a failing tile company, her husband left half operational in a country she had never lived in, and turned it into a functioning, profitable, growing export business through letters, through patience, through the refusal to be intimidated by what she did not know yet. One careful question at a time, one careful answer. 1 year of attention laid on top of the last. She was running a company across an international border from the house on Sycamore Lane, from the kitchen where she made Sunday gravy and kept her ceramic bird on the windowsill, from the life that everyone in our family had looked at and seen a quiet old woman living quietly. She was not quiet. She was concentrated. There is a difference so large between those two things that I do not know how we all missed it for so long. Then I thought, we didn't miss it. We never looked. I called my mother from a bench in Forsyth Park before I drove back. I needed her voice before I decided anything. Rosa answered on the second ring. I didn't explain everything. She has always known when not to ask. I said simply, "Mama, did grandfather ever say anything to you about what he was really building?" The silence that followed was not the silence of someone without an answer. It was the silence of someone who has been holding one for a long time. Then she said carefully, "He saw you from the beginning, Valentina. He told me once, when you were maybe 14 or 15, that you were the only person in that family who would know what to do with what he'd built. He didn't mean the buildings. He meant the values he'd built them on." "Why didn't you tell me?" Her breath caught. "Because I didn't want you to feel the weight of it before you were strong enough to carry it. Protection from outside always looks like silence from inside." We stayed on the phone a while after that without saying much. Sometimes the most important conversations are the ones where what goes unsaid is finally understood. I drove back to Hollow Creek in February. Elena had declined faster than any of us expected, which is the way these things go when they go the way she had already decided they would. Hospice at home, her own bed, her ceramic bird on the windowsill. She had filed the paperwork 3 months before her first hospital visit, and my father had not known to argue with it by the time he found out it existed. I took leave from my Savannah contract. My supervisor Bernard looked at me across his desk and said, "Valentina, go. The buildings will be here when you get back. She won't." I moved into the guest room on Sycamore Lane. The rest of the family visited in rotation, each visit following the same choreography. They arrived, sat in the living room, talked about themselves and their spring plans and things Elena had no investment in. 40 minutes to an hour, they left. I stayed. I cooked. I changed the water in the vases. I read to her in the evenings. Italian poetry, American architecture journals, a mystery series set in Venice that she critiqued for geographical inaccuracies with the authority of a woman who had grown up 40 miles from the city. "That canal does not connect to that square," she said once, eyes closed while I read aloud. "Should I tell the author? He is dead. Tell me instead." And I told her about the canal I had stood beside once, on a student trip. The color, the smell, the particular quality of light off Venice water in October. She listened with her whole face. Then she smiled, and for a moment she was 22 again, and Naples was behind her, and everything was still being decided. One evening, near the end of February, she asked me to sit with her in the kitchen after dinner. The house was quiet. The ceramic bird caught the last of the evening light on the windowsill. She took my hand across the table. "If I left you the property in Santa Fe and the company in Monterey," she said, "what would you do first?" I thought about it. I did not rush. She had never rushed me. "I'd go to Monterey first. I'd meet Carlos Vega. I'd want to understand what you built before I touched a single thing about it." She looked at me for a long time, the way she looked at things she had been waiting to see. "That is the right answer," said the way a teacher says it when you have not just answered the question, but revealed something about the shape of your thinking they have been quietly hoping for. She squeezed my hand. She picked up her tea. The ceramic bird held the last of the light a moment and then let it go. "Edie," she said. She had called me Edie since I was 3. Everyone else called me Valentina. "I am not sad. I have had a very long and very interesting life, and I have been paying attention the whole time." She looked at me. "So have you. That is not a small thing. That is everything." I did not cry, not yet. I sat with her until she was ready to sleep. I helped her to her room. I turned down the quilt her mother had carried across an ocean. I kissed her forehead. She was asleep before I reached the door.
Nana Elena died on a Wednesday morning in April. Not dramatically, not with any of the theater death sometimes performs. She died the way she had done everything, quietly, on her own terms, in a room that smelled of old books and wool and the Meyer lemon that had finally started to bloom again after a hard winter. I was with her. I had been reading The Venice Mystery. I stopped because I thought she was asleep. I sat in the chair beside her bed. I looked at the ceramic bird on the windowsill. I looked at her hands, folded on top of the cover, still and composed. The furnace clicked off. The house got very still, and I understood, not with my mind was the last to know, with the part of me that had been calling her every Sunday for 14 years, and knew the weight of her hand in mine, and knew that something had shifted in the world that could not be shifted back. Her hand was still warm. I did not call anyone for 20 minutes. I needed those 20 minutes to be the last person in the world who had not yet lost her. Outside, a bird landed somewhere in the Meyer lemon tree, made one sound, was quiet. Then I picked up the phone. The family arrived within the hour. My father asked about the will before the funeral flowers were ordered. Marco called a real estate contact in Santa Fe before the obituary was written. Bianca posted a black and white photograph of Elena's hands with a caption about matriarchs that used the word legacy 4 times. My mother pulled me aside on the second evening and asked in the careful voice she used when she wanted something she did not want to be seen wanting, whether Elena had ever mentioned updating the deed on the Sycamore Lane house. I looked at my mother. I looked at the ceramic bird on the kitchen windowsill. I said, "I'll let you know." I went to my room. I closed the door. I took out my phone and called 2 numbers. First, Mireille Santos. Second, a number in Monterey I had written in my own handwriting in a small notebook I kept in my jacket pocket. It rang 3 times. A man answered, careful, accented, the particular steadiness of someone who has been waiting for a call they knew was coming. Ms. Rossi-Cade. Mr. Vega. A pause, not uncomfortable, the pause of 2 people taking the measure of each other across a distance that was both geographical and everything else. Then Carlos Vega said in a voice quiet and certain, "She talked about you every single time we spoke, every time for 15 years. She said you were the one who understood what things are for." I sat on the edge of the guest room bed under the pressed botanical prints. I looked at the quilt her mother had carried across an ocean. I said, "Tell me about the company, Mr. Vega. Tell me everything. I want to understand what she built." And in Monterrey, Mexico, in the offices of a ceramic tile company called Tierra Fina, a man who had been faithful to her grandmother's vision for 15 years began to speak. And I listened the way she had taught me to listen, with my whole self, for as long as it took. The morning of the will reading, I put on a gray dress and stood in front of the mirror in the Sycamore Lane guest room for a long time. Not because I was vain about it, because I needed a moment before I walked into a room I could already feel from a distance. The kind that has a specific gravity, the kind that pulls everything in your life toward it and rearranges the weight of things permanently once you leave it. I picked up the ceramic bird from the nightstand, held it for a second. Small, cool, painted in colors that had faded at the edges from years of windowsill light. I put it in my coat pocket. Then I drove to Maria's borrowed conference room on Clement Street, which smelled of old carpet and central heating. She looked at me when I came in. "Are you ready?" I thought about 14 years of Sunday calls, a trowel and a tile, and a woman saying, "Start from the center." A portfolio on a table in Santa Fe, 15 years of letters in slanted cursive, a factory floor in Monterey, and a man who said she talked about you every single time. "I have been getting ready for 31 years without knowing it," I said. Maria opened her portfolio and said nothing else. The family arrived in pieces. My father, Dominic, came first, in a dark suit that had fit him better 5 years ago. He sat at the head of the table the way he sat at every table, like the room was waiting for him to settle before it could begin. Marco came in without knocking. He looked at Maria's portfolio, and I watched him doing arithmetic behind his eyes, quick and private, revealing in the way private things are revealing when someone forgets to keep their face still. Bianca arrived last, phone in her bag. For Bianca, the equivalent of arriving in full armor. She folded her hands and looked at Maria with the expression of someone who has rehearsed her reaction to several possible outcomes. I sat on the side closest to the window. Beside me was an empty chair. I had asked Lucia Ferrano to come, Elena's oldest friend, a retired judge who had spent 40 years being the most composed person in difficult rooms. She arrived 2 minutes after Bianca in a dark green blazer, sat beside me, and put her hand briefly over mine. She did not say anything. She did not need to. Maria read the preamble, legal language establishing Elena's identity, capacity, state of mind. My family listened the way people listen to opening credits of a film they didn't come to see the opening credits of. Then the specific bequests. The ceramic bird, Maria paused there, and I felt the one in my pocket, to Valentina. The complete Venice mystery series, including the signed first edition of the 4th book, to Lucia Ferrano. The hand-painted courtyard tile designs, reproduced as archeol prints, to Carlos Vega and the workers of Tierra Fina, Monterrey. The baby grand piano to the Hollow Creek Community Music Program. My father's jaw set. He had appraised the piano. He was watching it leave the column in his head where he had placed it. Maria turned a page. The room went very quiet, in the way rooms go quiet when everyone has stopped breathing at slightly the same moment without coordinating it. The principal remainder of the estate, Maria read, her voice level as a surveyor's instrument, comprising the family residence at 14 Sycamore Lane, Hollow Creek, Georgia, the Santa Fe artistic colony known as Rossi Studios, its 6 acres, 8 studio structures in all operational trusts, the majority controlling stake of 58% in Tierra Fina Ceramics, Monterrey, Mexico, all remaining accounts and holdings valued collectively at approximately $38.4 million. The clock on the wall ticked. Once. Twice. The testator leaves the entirety of this remainder to her granddaughter, Valentina Elena Rossi-Cade. Nobody moved. Is this a joke? My father's voice was flat, controlled, the voice of a man who has not yet decided how large his reaction is going to be. It is a legal document, Maria said, executed with full capacity and witnessed by 2 independent parties. He said it again, louder, as if volume would change the contents of the folder. My mother made a sound below language. Marco pushed back from the table, creating distance from the document as if proximity was the problem. Bianca's hand moved toward her bag, toward her phone. She caught herself. She put her hands back on the table and looked at me with an expression I had never seen on her face. Not anger, not grief, but something raw. The face of a woman who has understood something she cannot un-understand. Maria turned to the final page. I leave this to my granddaughter Valentina, she read, because she is the only one who ever asked what I was building and not what it was worth. She came because she wanted to. She stayed because she understood. She called every Sunday for 14 years, not because she expected anything from those calls, but because she genuinely wanted to know how I was. That is not a small thing. In my experience, it is the rarest thing. I have had a long life and a full one, and I leave its remainder in the hands of the person I trust most completely to know what things are for. Lucia's hand found mine under the table. I held on. My father stood up. The lawsuit arrived 11 days later, heavy manila envelope, a Hollow Creek attorney stamped in the upper left corner. I stood at the mailbox on Sycamore Lane and held it before I opened it, thinking about what my grandmother had known, that the people who do not build things always believe the people who do build them must have stolen them from somewhere. The cause of action was undue influence. They were claiming I had manipulated an elderly, ailing woman into leaving her her entire estate. I sat on the porch steps. The Meyer lemon tree was budding, new growth on every branch, small and bright and completely indifferent to the paper in my hands. Then I called Felix Guerrero, the attorney Lucia had referred me to 2 weeks before the will reading, as if she knew. He picked up on the second ring. "They filed," I said. "I know. Valentina, your grandmother understood litigation. She prepared for this the way she prepared for everything, methodically, years in advance. You let me show the court what she built, and this case will not survive contact with the evidence." I looked at the Meyer lemon tree. "Show them everything." The hearing was on a Thursday in October. Felix walked the court through the will, then the capacity evaluations. Dr. Camille Okafor had evaluated Elena 3 times, at the will signing in 2022, a scheduled follow-up in 2023, and at Elena's own insistence 11 weeks before she died. All 3 returned the same conclusion: full testamentary capacity, no cognitive impairment. Dr. Okafor took the stand and said, "In my 3rd evaluation, 11 weeks before her death, Mrs. Rossi-Cade correctly recalled all specific bequests, articulated her reasoning for each without prompting, and identified 2 clerical errors in the evaluation form that my own office had not caught. She was, in my professional assessment, one of the sharpest individuals I have evaluated in 30 years of practice." The family's attorney did not cross-examine her. Lucia took the stand in her dark green blazer. She said, "Elena Rossi-Cade and I played bridge every Wednesday for 41 years. In the last month of her life, she remembered a hand I misplayed in September of 1988 and reminded me of it. She was not influenced by anyone. She was the most unpersuadable person I have ever known. And I say that as someone who spent decades on the bench watching people attempt to persuade each other professionally." She looked at my father. Elena Rossi-Cade knew exactly what she was doing. The fact that her family did not notice is not evidence of manipulation. It is evidence of inattention. Then I took the stand. The family's attorney was thorough. Did I suggest how she should distribute her estate? No. Did I discuss her financial holdings with her? No. I didn't know the extent of them. Did I encourage her to favor me in any way? No. He paused. "Then why, in your opinion, did she leave you everything?" I had not prepared for that one. I sat with it. "I called her every Sunday for 14 years, I said. I drove to Santa Fe when she asked me to. I moved into her guest room when she was dying so she would not be alone at night. I read to her from a mystery series set in Venice that she critiqued for geographical inaccuracies." I stopped, took a breath. "I did all of that because I wanted to, because she was the most interesting person I knew, and I did not want to miss a single conversation with her for as long as I could have them. I did not do any of it for this. I did not know this existed. I came on Sundays because it was Sunday. That was the whole reason." The courtroom was quiet. Judge Devane wrote something on her pad, long enough that I could hear the pen moving. "The court finds the will valid as executed in full compliance with applicable law. The contest is dismissed. Plaintiffs to bear defendants' reasonable attorney's fees." Felix closed his portfolio. He gave one small, definitive nod. I did not look at my father. I looked at the empty chair beside me. I put my hand on it once. Then I stood up and walked out of that courtroom and into the rest of my life. Here is what the rest looked like. I did not sell the Sycamore Lane house. I deeded Lucia the right to use the front rooms for a reading circle she had been wanting to start for years. She named it Elena's Table and painted the sign herself in the colors of the Santa Fe courtyard tiles. I moved to Santa Fe in October. I spent 3 weeks learning the property first, walking it at different hours to understand the light, meeting the 14 artists in residence one by one over coffee, learning which studio had the drafty north window and which one the artist called the lucky room because 3 of the most important pieces made on the property came out of it. I hired a local architect to assess the structural condition of all 8 buildings. We found 2 that needed foundation reinforcement. I was on site every day. You cannot understand a building from a distance. You have to touch it. I flew to Monterey 4 times in the first year. Carlos Vega and I argued about production timelines on the second visit with the energized friction of 2 people who respect each other enough to disagree. He told me afterward it was the most Elena thing anyone had done in that office since Elena stopped calling. I took that as the highest professional compliment I had ever received. My father sent me a letter in December, not an email, a letter, handwritten in the cramped architectural script I had been reading since childhood. It was not an apology. It was a list of things he remembered his mother doing when he was young. The Saturday mornings she drove him 40 minutes to a music lesson he loved but was not talented at. The notes she put in his school lunch every day for 12 years without once repeating. He wrote at the bottom, "I never thanked her for any of it. I don't know when I decided she didn't need to be thanked. I am writing this down because I think if I say it out loud, I will not be able to finish it." I read it 4 times. I put it in the wooden box with the ceramic bird and the folded copy of the will and the program from Rosa Medina's gallery show. I did not write back yet. I am waiting for the right words the way my grandmother waited for everything, patiently, without forcing it. On a Saturday in August, I sat on the porch of the main house in Santa Fe and watched the sun go down over the desert. I had a letter in my lap that I was writing to her. I told her about the fellows, the Elena Rossi-Cade Fellowship for first-generation architecture students in Georgia, $20,000 per recipient, 12 students in the first class, 2 of them from Hollow Creek, both approvals signed at the kitchen table with the ceramic bird on the windowsill. I told her about the Meyer lemon cutting I had taken before leaving Sycamore Lane, now in a clay pot on the porch railing, putting out new growth in a climate it was not designed for, doing exactly what it needed to do. I told her I had figured something out. I had not won because of money. The money was real, and I was not pretending otherwise, but it had never been the point. I had learned because of her, without her ever teaching it directly, how to pay attention to a person, how to show up not for what they had or what they could give, but for who they were and what they were building and what they were thinking about and what the light was doing over their particular piece of the world on any given Sunday. I had won because I came on Sundays for no reason. Because when she asked what I would do with everything she had built, I said I would go to Monterey first and understand it before I touched a single thing. Because I knocked on the door of room 114 while my family walked through walls. Because I had learned from the most patient woman I ever knew that the most radical thing you can do in a world that mistakes loudness for substance is to be quiet, consistent, and present, and to trust that the people paying attention will notice. She had been paying attention for 31 years, and in the end, she paid it forward. I folded the letter. I tucked it into the ceramic bird, into the hollow space inside where she had told me when I was small that small things could be kept safe. A bird landed on the porch railing near the Meyer lemon cutting. It looked at me with the complete, unimpressed directness of a bird. Then it flew away. I stayed, through it all, the way she taught me to. Hey guys, before you go, I want to ask you something honest. Is there someone in your life right now who shows up quietly without being asked, without keeping score? Someone who calls on Sundays, someone who knocks before they enter, someone who asks what you're building and genuinely means it. Do you have such a person in your life right now?
Tell me who that person is in the comments. Give them their name out loud in this space. Because the Elenas of this world spend so much of their lives paying attention that sometimes nobody pays attention back, and they deserve to be named. They deserve every love. And here's the best part. If this story sat with you the way a true thing sits with you, give it a thumbs up. Ensure to subscribe to this channel so you're first to receive our stories as they drop daily. I will be here crafting new stories for your listening pleasure. See you around. I love you all.